Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe with CJ Vogel. This is Longhorn Weekly, where we take a little bit of a look back at the weekend that was, but more so, this is a look ahead at the week to come on the 40 acres. But let's thank our sponsor before we get started, Allegiant Digital. Are you a business owner who struggles with the following? Finding new customers, consistent leads, finding marketing services to promote your business that actually work? Founder and CEO Chad Markham with Allegiant Digital Marketing, an Austin-based advertising agency, has helped thousands of business owners just like you for over 25 years conquer these same challenges. So if you're ready to start making money in your business and grow with confidence, visit allegiantdigital.com/ontexasfootball and get a free marketing plan. Plus, you can save up to $2,500 in advertising with their Hook 'em Horns special today. Again, that's allegiantdigital.com/ontexasfootball for your free marketing plan with Chad Markham and Allegiant Digital Marketing. And thank you to Allegiant Digital Marketing for sponsoring Longhorn Weekly. CJ, the big task for Steve Sarkisian this week, he's got a staff vacancy to fill still. And we've talked a lot about the different ways he can go. Can you hire, kind of an overseer as a secondary coach? And heck, maybe you can have up to 4 people working in the secondary. I don't know. Depends, because there's no rules for on-field coaches. You can do whatever you want. But at the very least, CJ, he's got to start narrowing it down. And I think it's safe to say this week we should start to at least hear the names filtering out from some of those, kind of wish list candidates to maybe zeroing in on who's actually in the running for this job.
Yeah, of course, last week it was all about the wish list. Who were some of these guys that if you had your dream opportunity to build a staff with the connections to Pete Kwiatkowski or Steve Sarkisian previously, who would those guys be? Going through resumes, finding those connections, what kind of recruiting success and on-field development have they had previously, and do they make sense to make the jump to Texas from wherever they're from? Now we're starting to get more into okay, there's actually been some conversations behind the scenes with XYZ. One name that I'll throw out right now that I've been able to confirm is Mike Mickens, defensive backs coach over at Notre Dame. He's been there 4 or 5 years now by now, hired in 2020. He was the cornerbacks coach for 4 years before getting the bump up to the overall defensive backs coach for the Fighting Irish. And look, Jeff, we've talked about solid defenses. Notre Dame in that conversation a lot because of that back end. The youngster Leonard Moore, Xavier Watts, another one, just being able to develop those guys over the last year or two has been impressive. But it to me, this next week is going to be very important in terms of when that timeline comes about for Sarkisian to act on his next defensive backs coach, as well as who starts to really emerge moving forward. It'll be really this week where I think you start to see, the pretenders and contenders start to separate for this job.
Yeah, I think another name to maybe throw out there that we didn't mention a ton last week, Doug Belk, the USC defensive backs coach who worked with Sark, was on the staff with Sark at Alabama. He's another name that I think is worth mentioning. But speaking of things worth mentioning, CJ, I keep going back to this the further along we get into this process of Sark hiring somebody to fill Blake Gideon's role on the staff. I think it's worth mentioning, even though the secondary had a great year last year, Blake Gideon and Terry Joseph weren't Pete Kwiatkowski's guys. And right, as we've seen more staff turnover, and now with Blake Gideon gone, I think this is a chance for Pete Kwiatkowski to really get somebody in that secondary room. And not to say he doesn't trust Terry Joseph, but if you feel there's an upgrade to be made overall with your secondary coaches, this is the ideal time to do it. And CJ, another thing we haven't talked about, Terry Joseph got a contract extension a couple of years ago. That contract expires at the end of the month, and we haven't heard anything about whether there's been something agreed to or anything along those lines. So it's an interesting time. If PK was ever going to maybe try to upgrade in the secondary, this is a time to do it.
Yeah, and especially to go get his guys, right? His quote-unquote guys. Those are big for your coaching trees to make sure that you don't need to be, spending too much time with guys that you haven't had that familiarity with yet, and we're 4 years into Pete Kwiatkowski's time here at Texas. There should be that continuity, familiarity by now. But again, maybe there's, a guy that you're closer to that coaches that position. I don't know. The one thing that's been surprising to me, Jeff, is if you're Terry Joseph and your contract expires at the end of the month, but you just, quote unquote, produced the Thorpe Award winner, you think you read a little bit between the lines on what that situation might be at the moment.
I would want to be getting paid if I'm Terry Joseph.
I agree.
I want to know where my contract extension is and where my raise is. But again, this is all you're at the point, CJ, with Texas. If you're Sark, if you're PK, that's, hey, we've gotten to the Final Four 2 years in a row. You won the Big 12 2 years ago. You played for the SEC championship last year. This is not about holding serve. This is about, hey, if there's a move to be made to get us a step closer to winning a national championship, then I've got to go make it. That's the thought process that PK and Sark have to take with this. And I think it's key to remember too, CJ, when you talk about the schematic evolution of Pete Kwiatkowski's defense. Rod Babers and I talked about this last week on Football Theory. Johnny Nansen brought a lot to the table in terms of coverages. If you go back to his Arizona defense, Arizona played as much single high safety as anybody in the country, and Texas had predominantly been a 2 high safety defense under Pete Kwiatkowski through his first 3 years in the program. Last year, they played a lot more middle field closed with the post safety. And now what that does is that opens you up to so much more in terms of how you can expand your coverages, not just playing, that pattern match quarters coverage that they did. You can play more cover 3. You can play more man free. I just think I keep going back to something Sark keeps harping about. And, he talked about a little less last year. It was a lot easier to do it when, Janae wins the Thorpe Award and you have one of the best pass defenses in the country. But talking about guys being, quote unquote, stickier in man coverage, he wants guys to play tight man coverage. And I think as they've recruited the personnel, it started with Manny Muhammad, you bring in a Kobe Black, now we see it with a Cade Phillips. And again, guys like Santana Wilson, Wardell Mack, they're also going to factor into this. But CJ, I just think Steve Sarkisian wants a secondary that above all else can be elite playing man coverage. I think it goes back to those Nick Saban, Bill Belichick principles of, hey, if you're going to play in the secondary in this defense, you got to be able to tackle, you got to be able to play really good man-to-man coverage, and you got to be able to play the football in the deepest part of the field. I think it all goes back to that with Sark. And if you've got a chance to be better at that by making a staff change or making a staff upgrade, I think that's what he's going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it doesn't take too much for you to go back and understand why they want to play that man-to-man cover, zero cover 1 defenses. Look at what Georgia did coming into Texas's own home in the middle of the season and just saying, you know what, our edge rushers are going to get home and you're not going to find any separation down the field for when the time that you do have protection and a pocket to throw into, no one's going to be open. And it made life very difficult for Texas. And we just saw Texas was once again a Final Four team in the country. Yet Georgia, because they have that level of athleticism, that level of speed in the secondary, it complements that pass rush very well and makes life a living hell, essentially, for opposing offenses. I'm all for it again. And I think Texas has recruited to that level at the cornerback position. It's all philosophically, can you mend the talent, the development, and also, the coaching to get to that level as well. And we'll see what all transpires with the secondaries coaching spots. Blake Gideon, that's not a tough one to replace. That'll be an interesting one, as well as what happens with Terry Joseph at the end of the month.
Maximizing an elite pass rush to CJ. The Texas pass rush is going to be one of the best in the country.
Yes.
The edge room is going to be one of the best in the country. And speaking of elite pass rush, good defensive fronts, we saw that in the Super Bowl with the Eagles win over the Chiefs. And a lifetime Longhorn was a part of that. Moro Ojomo had him a tackle for loss in the Super Bowl. CJ, regardless of who anybody was rooting for, it couldn't have been a better night for Texas because Moro Ojomo had a big play. It was part of a historic performance by that Eagles defensive line. They got after Patrick Mahomes without blitzing. Xavier Worthy, on the other hand, had a monster game, 157 yards and 2 touchdowns. And you can't really fault Charles Omenihu because that Chiefs defense just ended up being on the field way too much because the offense couldn't get anything going. From a perception standpoint, CJ, it's one thing to have a bunch of draft picks, and that helps you in recruiting. It's just another piece of the puzzle. It's another feather in your cap when you can have 3 guys participate in the Super Bowl, and all 3 of them can make an impact the way Texas got out of Charles Omenihu, Xavier Worthy, in a losing effort, and then Moro Ojomo winning a Super Bowl ring.
Yeah, there was a cool moment as Moro Ojomo was coming off the field. He kind of, it was just him and Xavier Worthy between the sidelines, kind of just gave him a little high five, a little, hey, I see you. Like, we're here. We're at the Super Bowl. I know we're playing against one another, but they've come a long way. And to go back to Xavier Worthy, to be the quote unquote first recruit for Sarkisian in that 21 season, to go out there to be a first round pick, to live up to the expectations of coming to Texas for 3 years, and then to go out and put up 157 on 7 receptions and 2 scores. That's a heck of a statement right there. And again, he's sharing the field with Hollywood Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, Travis Kelce. He was the number 1 guy last night, and he made some really impressive plays. It's kind of funny, having watched a lot of the Chiefs games this year, Jeff, to see those big plays, right? The touchdown, the deep crosser that went for 50 yards. Say, okay, where was this earlier in the year, right? The Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, he didn't throw the ball deep really at all this year. It was one of the shallowest average distance of targets of his entire career. Yet you come out in the Super Bowl in a game in which you completely struggle to get any offensive rhythm. It's the deep passes to X that really get something going for the Chiefs. It was always, way too late, but point being, great marketing opportunity and recruiting tool to say, yeah, that's our guy. We developed him. We recruited him. He was a star here. He's a star in the NFL. This is what we're going to be the new standard as at the University of Texas.
And I keep going back, CJ, to that 2021 recruiting class. That's kind of the standard of, hey, when you take a job, don't completely discard what you inherit from the previous staff, because Xavier Worthy was the only guy in that class the Steve Sarkisian regime recruited. But Jatavian Sanders, Byron Murphy, Jonathan Brooks, Baron Sorrell in the upcoming draft, Gunnar Helm in the upcoming draft, even guys like Juan Davis, Hayden Connor, who ended up playing a lot of quality football for Texas, helped Texas win a lot of games. CJ, that's the kind of stuff that shows, hey, you are a really good developmental program. When you take guys that we didn't evaluate these guys, we didn't offer these guys, we didn't recruit these guys, yet we didn't pull any scholarships, we honored those scholarships. And those guys ended up helping form the foundation of where we see Texas now, which is a legitimate national title contender, a legitimate contender in the SEC.
To add to that, it should only be more, optimistic for the future is that, okay, now that they're recruiting at a higher level, interior defensive line, offensive line, those key positions, you're going to continue to see that development, but you're going to see a higher ceiling as a result, right? And this isn't the takeaway from some of the guys that have come through at the program previously, but you just stacked a top three in a number 1 recruiting class in the entire country. That ceiling is going to be a little bit higher. If they could do that with a Moro Ojomo, Keandre Coburn, Tavondre Sweat, imagine what they'll be able to do with a Justice Terry, a guy like Josiah Sharma, some of these nationally ranked interior defensive linemen. It's really encouraging. And I think, again, when you start to see how the Eagles were able to just dominate that football game with their offensive line, giving Jalen Hurts basically 3 days to throw a football down the field while also creating pressure on Patrick Mahomes and getting him down to the ground. One of the more sneaky elusive guys in the entire NFL. Starts with the trenches, and Texas has been recruiting that as well as they ever have over the last 3 cycles or so.
Yep. Games are won and lost up front at any level of football. I don't care what level you're talking about. And the Eagles showed that. Texas has shown that. The resurgence of the program, like you said, it goes back to valuing certain things in recruiting. Sark wanted to be really good in the trenches, and we've seen Texas get to this point. But now it's, hey, again, can you take it up a notch? Can you take it to another level? And we'll see if Kyle Flood and Sark can do that. And speaking of that, CJ, official visits are getting scheduled. We got several big ones over the weekend got locked in, including John Turntine's got his official visit locked in. Speaking of the line of scrimmage and needing to get elite prospects, high ceiling prospects at that position. But we're talking about linebackers. We're talking about Mark Bowman, the tight end out of California, has got his official visit locked in. CJ, what's that look like right now? Got to give us the groundwork for those June 13th and 20th visit weekends. Going to be 2 massive weekends for the Longhorns coming up this summer.
Yeah, it will be. There right now, 20 official visits have been locked in by our count over here at On Texas Football. We'll start with Mark Bowman and Xavier Crowell on the 6th. Of course, Mark Bowman, the reclassified 2027 tight end from Mater Dei out in California. He's now part of the 26th class. That's a 5-star level talent. I know that he's on the younger side, but a heck of a prospect. Someone Texas has been really interested in as of late. June 13th, June 20th right now, of course, going to be the 2 big, and I mean big in terms of not just size and mass of offensive and defensive linemen, but recruiting numbers, right? Guys coming in. Texas right now has 9 in each weekend. Tank King, the linebacker out of Port Arthur Memorial, was the last addition to the June 13th official visit weekend. And then, Jeff, you just mentioned John Turtine. I'll add Sam Utu as well, both on the offensive line. They're added to the June 20th official visit weekend. That also includes Nick Robertson, Max Wright, the newest Texas commit in the 26 class, and Samuel Roseborough out of Florida, Clearwater, Florida. Look, I know that Texas is after a number of offensive linemen, but those 5 guys I just mentioned all coming in for the June 20th official visit weekend, that's a pretty solid class right there.
CJ, what's top of mind for you this week in terms of recruiting? Coaches aren't on the road, and
Right.
as a matter of fact, some of the staff members are going to start taking well-deserved vacations. Some of them are going to get that. So what should everybody be looking out for this week on the recruiting trail?
Yeah, for me, it's still just an accumulation of official visits. When are those guys coming in? I think you'll also start to hear about some spring junior days starting to arise. You know, guys will start getting some of these top lists narrowed down. We saw that a couple times with Malachi Lee, offensive lineman from Hawaii as well. I know I didn't mention him, but Texas made the top 6 for him over the weekend. It's going to be interesting to see how many of these lists get trimmed down, how many spring ball visit weekends are locked in as well. That's kind of the next phase for really the rest of the month until these coaches are back out, until spring ball comes rolling around. And of course, as we get nearer and nearer to these official visits in the month of June.
It's so fun for Texas to be in the fight with not just some of the top prospects in the state of Texas, but some of the top prospects in the country. And right now, before we'll talk some Longhorn baseball and men's and women's basketball. But before that, got to remind you again about our sponsor today. Big thank you to Allegiant Digital Marketing. Are you a business owner who struggles with the following? Finding new customers, consistent leads, finding marketing services to promote your business that actually work? Founder and CEO Chad Markham with Allegiant Digital Marketing, an Austin-based advertising agency, has helped thousands of business owners just like you for over 25 years conquer these same challenges. So if you're ready to start making money in your business and grow with confidence, visit allegiantdigital.com/ontexasfootball and get a free marketing plan. Plus, you can save up to $2,500 in advertising with their Hook 'em Horn special today. Again, that's allegiantdigital.com/ontexasfootball for your free marketing plan, courtesy of Chad Markham and Allegiant Digital Marketing. CJ, baseball season starts on Friday. We debuted Bases Loaded. You, myself, Blake Monroe. That's going to drop every Friday here on the channel. Media day coming up on Tuesday. Schloss and some players going to be available. We'll probably figure out what the weekend pitching rotation looks like. CJ, I'm going to go ahead and guess. If I say, CJ, what's one thing you're going to be watching come this weekend at Globe Life? I would say Adrian Rodriguez, but it's probably going to start with, can Texas just please win one of these non-conference games at Globe Life? They're 0 forever. 0 for lifetime at Globe Life in these showcase games. They've won a couple of Big 12 tournament games, won a series with Oklahoma. But, CJ, it starts with Louisville on Friday. Can Texas just leave Globe Life in February with a W? That's all I'm asking for.
It's the tallest task in the world, and it's funny. Every year we sit here and we start, okay, might as well just go 0-3 or 0-4 to start a season based off of this tournament. But I'm excited for it. Again, I think the sticks are going to be hot. You mentioned Adrian Rodriguez. I'm over the moon to see him for really, this year specifically, but what can he eventually turn into? To me, the big thing I want to see, Jeff, and I hope you're on board with me because it's been a roller coaster over the last couple of years, is just consistency in the strike zone. If you're on the mound, whether it be hard hits, whether it be, if you're allowing runs, that's part of baseball. But just no free bases, right? No free clear paths 90 feet down the line. I want to see consistency around the strike zone, finding it with your off speed, your changeups, whatever it might be. That's what I'm looking forward to, and I want to see it from the starters, Luke Harrison, Jared Spencer. Who are those next guys to come off in that rotation? But consistency in the strike zone has to be the key for me to start this season, because I think that's something that if you start with it well, your confidence will be high moving forward, and that's exactly what I'm hoping to see really week 1 in the season.
Yeah, piggybacking on that, CJ, a little bit more granular. I go back to something the late, great Augie Garrido used to talk about all the time. Augie used to say, get your outs on time. That means if you've got a ground ball coming your way, hey, make that routine play up first. Just get the out. In 2 strike counts, can you put guys away and not just nibbling and trying to be cute and get that strikeout that's going to look good on a highlight video? sometimes that's just, hey, in a 2-strike count, just make a guy make contact and let your infield go to work. We've talked about it, how good Texas can be defensively on the infield. Rylan Galvan coming back, Jalen Flores at short. You add Ethan Mendoza at second. You should be pretty good up the middle with Adrian Rodriguez at one corner. We figured Kimball Schuessler at the other corner. I'm not saying Texas is going to have the best defensive infield in the country, but you should be good enough that your pitchers can pitch to contact and let your defense work. So, again, just getting back to not messing around with 2 strikes. Just get your outs on time. Go compete. I think that's kind of what you're talking about, CJ. Hey, just go compete. Don't nibble. Don't try to be cute. Don't second-guess yourself. Just throw strikes. Trust yourself. And, hey, we'll see. Again, if Texas just leaves with a W, I know I'm setting the bar low, but trust me, I've seen too many of these weekends at Globe Life just end in disasters. So, if they just win one, if they get the Friday dub over Louisville, hey, to me, they're playing with house money the rest of the weekend. I know Schloss has higher expectations than that. But speaking of high expectations, CJ, you were in the house at Moody real quick on Sunday for that South Carolina win for the Texas women's basketball team. A huge win for Vic Schaefer and company. We had Vic Schaefer on Coffee and Football with Bobby, Jerry, and Blake on Monday. If you're a Texas women's basketball fan, CJ, it's a really good time to be one. And if you're not, it's time to get on board with what Vic Schaefer and company are doing. They're at Kentucky on Thursday, and then you talk about a big one again on Sunday, 2 Sundays in a row. It's Kim Mulkey coming back, the old nemesis coming back to town. She brings her LSU team into Moody Center. But CJ, looked like a really good atmosphere on Sunday.
No, it was awesome. You talk about raise the mood. It absolutely was there. 10,517 folks were in attendance on Super Bowl Sunday, nonetheless, to go watch a top 5 matchup against South Carolina. It was the first SEC regular season loss for South Carolina in 58 games. Texas snapped that 57-game win streak. Really impressive win. And again, if you're not yet familiar with this team, it's a very fun team to watch. There's great ball movement. They have 2 really talented point guards, Bree Preston, Rory Harmon, and of course, Madison Booker might be in the conversation for being one of the top 5, players in the entire country. When you talk about first-team All-Americans, her name absolutely is going to be in that conversation. She dropped 20 points. Her mid-range game is deadly. It's a really, really talented and versatile team. Again, when you start looking at what Shea Hawley does defensively, you look at what they have in terms of Kyla Oldacre, you look at Taylor Jones, what they have up front with that size. It's a tough team to beat. And again, when they're playing like they did on Sunday, they got a real chance, Jeff, to go all the way this season. Again, I think they're looking at a number 1 seed. This win should bump them up to number 2 or number 3 in the country. Big-time win, program-defining win. Now let's see what they can do down the stretch into the SEC tournament and, of course, into the NCAA tournament.
Well, we're not talking about a program-defining win, CJ. We're just talking about a win. That's what Rodney Terry and the Texas men need right now. A couple of tough losses last week to Arkansas and Vanderbilt. Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock at Moody Center, Alabama comes in. And then on Saturday, it's a big one. Big Blue Nation will be on the 40 acres when Kentucky comes to town. CJ, I know you're looking at some relief going to Columbia to play South Carolina on the 22nd, but you can't go to Columbia riding a 4-game losing streak.
Right.
Texas, we'll see where they are on the bubble to start the week, but they could play themselves, CJ, on the wrong side of the bubble real quick. They've got to get one of these 2 this week, if not both.
Yeah, absolutely have to split at least one of these games. That's what made last week so tough. You had 2 winnable games, and when you looked ahead at the rest of the schedule, you said, okay, those were the games that you had to take care of, right? Arkansas was in a slide. They went 1-6 in the month of January, and they come in and basically smack you around at your own house. That was a game that you needed to win for the insurance of what was ahead. And I think that's what has added to the frustration of this season is, you see the big win, you see the comeback against A&M, but you also see them fall flat. And with these 2 games coming up, Jeff, you have no margin for error to fall flat if you want to see your season continue into March. We'll see what they have in the tank, but right now, I'm going to be on the little pessimistic side here. I have to see it, and I don't see it consistently enough to make me a believer for this upcoming week.
Not going to be easy either with Tremont Mark dealing with a shoulder injury. Caden Shedrick's a little banged up. So, again, that's just life in the SEC. Everybody's dealing. Yeah, Arthur Kaluma's had his health issues. So, everybody's dealing with it in the SEC. You just got to come out and put your best foot forward every night. As tough, much easier said than done. But and also, CJ, it amplifies games like that lost to Ole Miss on the road at the buzzer, a game that You had a chance to get you a really quality one on the road, and you came up just short. So again, your margin for error has shrunk significantly. Season's not over, but it can get away from you real quick. So a massive week for Rodney Terry and the Texas men. We'll be tracking it all at ontexasfootball.com and here on the channel. Make sure you tune into all our shows throughout the week. We've got Coffee and Football in the mornings. We've got the Winning Drive coming up in the afternoons. We've got the Longhorn live streams at night. Stay tuned to the channel. We've got all your latest news, notes, and nuggets, whether Steve Sarkisian, when he makes a hire for that secondary coach spot, we'll have it here on the channel. Also, all the latest recruiting news, notes, and nuggets, we'll have it for you both at ontexasfootball.com and here on the channel. For CJ Vogel, I'm Jeff Howe. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, welcome.